The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was crisp, official looking, and embossed with the Willow Creek Homeowners Association logo. I'd half expected something like this, ever since I'd started prepping the house for painting. Willow Creek was, to put it mildly, particular about everything. Lawn height, mailbox styles, holiday decorations, all meticulously documented in the HOA bylaws, a document thicker than my old college textbooks. I'd read it, of course, dutifully highlighting sections about exterior paint colors. Earth tones only. Pre-approved palette available at HOA website. I'd followed the rules, meticulously selected a shade called Desert Sand from the approved list. Even ordered a sample pot to test it out on a section of the back of the house hidden from street view. The color was beige, spectacularly soul-crushingly beige. But it was approved beige. So beige, it was. Or so I thought. The letter wasn't about the color. It was about the process. Specifically, about the unauthorized commencement of exterior renovations. Renovations. Painting. The letter went on to detail the required permits, the mandatory contractor registration, the need for a pre-painting inspection to ensure compliance with community aesthetic standards. A pre-painting inspection for beige paint on a house that was already essentially beige, just a slightly faded, peeling version of beige. I sighed, running a hand through my already messy hair. This was going to be a bureaucratic nightmare. I'd lived in Willow Creek for 5 years, and every interaction with the HOA had been a slow, agonizing dance through red tape. They were like a shadow government, obsessed with minutiae, wielding their petty power with an almost gleeful efficiency. And at the heart of it all, I knew, was Karen Miller, the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek, the president of the HOA, the woman who lived 2 doors down and whose very existence seemed to be fueled by finding fault in others. I'd encountered Karen before, of course. The passive-aggressive notes on my trash cans when they were out too early. The thinly veiled complaints about my excessively vibrant petunias. They were red. Apparently red was a crime against suburban harmony. The timesheet kindly informed me that my holiday lights were a touch festive for January 2nd. Each interaction was a small, irritating pinprick, designed to remind me that I was living in her kingdom, and I was expected to adhere to her rules, written and unwritten. But this painting debacle felt different. It felt personal, like she was actively trying to make my life difficult. I reread the letter, my frustration simmering. The fine for unauthorized commencement was listed in bold. $500 for starting to paint my own house with approved beige paint. It was absurd, outrageous, and yet, somehow, utterly predictable in Willow Creek. I decided to try the reasonable approach, the adult approach. I called the HOA management company, a faceless entity that acted as Karen's bureaucratic shield. I explained the situation, patiently detailing my adherence to the approved color palette, my intention to follow all regulations, my confusion about the unauthorized commencement fine. The person on the other end of the line, a woman with a voice as monotone as the approved paint colors, listened without interruption, then recited a script about established procedures and mandatory compliance. She directed me to the HOA website, specifically to the renovation permit application section, and advised me to submit all required documentation, including contractor registration and proof of insurance, even though I was planning to paint the house myself. And, she added, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge, please be advised that any further unauthorized work may result in additional fines and potential legal action. legal action for painting my house beige. The absurdity was escalating. I hung up, the phone clattering onto the desk. Reasonable wasn't going to work. Adult wasn't going to work. Karen and her army of beige-loving bureaucrats were operating on a different level, a level of petty power and control that logic couldn't penetrate. I stared out the window at my house, the faded beige paint peeling like sunburnt skin. It looked tired, neglected, desperately in need of a fresh coat. And I, the homeowner, the person who paid the mortgage, the property taxes, the exorbitant HOA fees, was being prevented from doing something as simple as painting it. By Karen. 2 doors down, whose house, I noticed with a sudden surge of irritation, was painted a slightly different shade of beige. A shade that, if I remembered correctly from the meticulously documented bylaws, was technically not on the approved palette for my street. Hypocrisy. It was the fuel that powered the engines of petty tyrants like Karen. And in that moment, staring at her slightly off-beige house, a seed of rebellion began to sprout in my mind. A seed that was decidedly not beige. It was vibrant, defiant, and just a little bit crazy. And it involved paint, but not just any paint, and not just any design. The idea came to me in a flash, a sudden, exhilarating burst of inspiration amidst the beige-induced frustration. If Karen wanted to play games with paint, then we would play games with paint. But we would play on my terms, and we would play big, very big. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching, not paint colors, but something far more interesting. Mural artists, local artists, artists with a flair for the dramatic, artists who weren't afraid to push boundaries. I scrolled through online portfolios, my initial seed of rebellion growing into a full-blown Technicolor fantasy. Imagine it, I thought, a mural on my house. Something bold, something unexpected, something that would make Karen's beige-loving head explode. But what? What kind of mural? Abstract? Landscape? No, it had to be something more pointed, something personal. That's when it hit me. The perfect mural, the ultimate act of suburban defiance, Karen's face. But not just any portrait, a caricature, exaggerated, humorous, slightly unflattering, large, very large, covering the entire front of my house. The beige would be gone, replaced by Karen, staring out at Willow Creek, judging lawns, scrutinizing trash cans, silently condemning anyone who dared to deviate from the beige-approved norm. The sheer audacity of it made me laugh out loud. It was insane. It was childish. It was utterly brilliant. I spent the next few hours refining the idea. I wouldn't just slap a random caricature on the house. It would be art. In a twisted, satirical way, but art nonetheless. I envisioned a pop art style portrait. Bold lines, vibrant colors, definitely not beige. Maybe even a Warhol-esque repetition of her image. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my house, my space, my sanity from the beige tyranny of Willow Creek. It was about making a statement, a very large, very colorful, very Karen-centric statement. I contacted a local mural artist named Ricardo, whose portfolio I'd found online. His work was bold, vibrant, and often satirical. Perfect. I emailed him the HOA letter, explained the situation, and outlined my unconventional idea To my surprise, he responded enthusiastically within hours. He loved the concept. He called it guerrilla art for the suburbs. We scheduled a meeting for the next day to discuss the details. I spent the evening sketching out rough ideas for the mural, fueled by a mixture of righteous anger and giddy excitement. I imagined Karen's reaction, her face contorted in outrage, her voice sputtering with indignation. The thought alone was almost worth the $500 fine. Almost. But I wasn't just going to pay the fine. I was going to make them earn it. I was going to make them regret ever sending that beige-loving letter. I was going to paint my house. And Willow Creek, and especially Karen, would never be the same again. Ricardo arrived the next morning, a whirlwind of energy and artistic enthusiasm. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with bright eyes and paint-splattered jeans. He listened intently as I elaborated on my vision, nodding and sketching in a notebook. I showed him photos of Karen, gleaned from the HOA website and a bit of strategic Facebook stalking. He chuckled, immediately grasping the satirical potential. "This is gold," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Pure gold. We can make her iconic, like suburban Che Guevara, but with more beige." We spent hours brainstorming, refining the design, choosing colors, definitely no beige, and discussing the logistics. Ricardo assured me he could complete the mural in a few days, working quickly and efficiently. He even had a drone that could take aerial photos of the progress, perfect for documenting the transformation of my house. We agreed on a price, a surprisingly reasonable price, considering the scale and audacity of the project. I paid him a deposit, a small act of financial commitment that solidified my descent into suburban rebellion. As Ricardo left, buzzing with artistic energy, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Excitement, definitely. Anticipation. A touch of nervousness. And a deep, satisfying sense of mischief. I was about to unleash chaos on Willow Creek. Beige chaos. Karen chaos. But chaos nonetheless. I knew there would be consequences. More fines. Probably. Angry letters. Maybe even legal action, as the monotone voice on the phone had threatened. But I didn't care. I was done with beige. Done with petty rules. Done with Karen. This was my house. And I was going to paint it, however I damn well pleased. Even if it meant painting it with the face of the woman who tried to stop me. The next few days were a blur of activity. Ricardo and his small team arrived early each morning, armed with scaffolding, paint, and an arsenal of brushes and spray cans. The transformation was rapid, mesmerizing. The beige faded away, replaced by bold outlines, vibrant colors, and the unmistakable, increasingly recognizable features of Karen Miller. The first day, they focused on sketching the outline, projecting a digital image of Karen's face onto the house and tracing it onto the stucco. Neighbors started to notice. Curious glances turned into lingering stares. Whispers began to circulate. By the second day, the colors were going on. Bold yellows, vibrant oranges, shocking pinks. A palette designed to clash spectacularly with the surrounding beige conformity. Karen's face began to emerge from the chaos of paint strokes, larger than life, impossible to ignore. The neighborhood buzz intensified. Cars slowed down as they drove past. People stopped to take photos. The Willow Creek Facebook group exploded with speculation, outrage, and a surprising amount of amusement. Some neighbors were horrified, predicting the imminent collapse of property values and the downfall of suburban civilization. Others were secretly thrilled, enjoying the spectacle of rebellion in their otherwise predictable lives. And then there were those who were simply confused, wondering if I'd finally lost my mind. By the third day, the mural was nearing completion. Karen's face dominated the front of my house, a pop art queen reigning over Willow Creek. Ricardo had added subtle details, satirical touches that amplified the caricature. Slightly exaggerated wrinkles, a hint of a double chin, eyes that seemed to perpetually scrutinize and judge. It was hilarious. It was outrageous. It was perfect. And then Karen showed up. I saw her car pull up across the street, a pristine white SUV that screamed suburban respectability. She emerged, slowly, deliberately, her face a mask of carefully controlled fury. She walked towards my house, her steps stiff, her body radiating indignation. The small crowd of onlookers that had gathered on the sidewalk fell silent, anticipating the confrontation. This was it. The beige was about to hit the fan. Karen stood on my lawn, staring up at the mural, her mouth opening and closing silently like a fish gasping for air. Her face, in real life, was even more contorted than Ricardo's caricature. She looked like she might spontaneously combust. Finally, she found her voice, a high-pitched screech that echoed through the quiet suburban street. What is this?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the mural. This monstrosity." I walked out onto my porch, calmly sipping a glass of iced tea, enjoying the show. "It's my house, Karen," I said, my voice deliberately calm and even. "And it's painted." "Painted?" she sputtered. "Painted with my face. You painted your house with my face." "Well, yes," I said, taking another sip of iced tea. "You seemed so concerned about the aesthetics of my house, I thought I'd give you something truly aesthetically interesting to look at." Her face turned an alarming shade of purple. This is harassment. This is vandalism. I'm calling the police. I'm calling the HOA. I'm suing you." "Sue me, Karen," I said, still calm. "But before you do, you might want to check the HOA bylaws again. There's nothing in there that prohibits painting a portrait on your house, even a portrait of the HOA president." She blinked, momentarily taken aback. But it's offensive. It's ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Is it really more ridiculous than fining me $500 for starting to paint my house beige? Is it more ridiculous than requiring a pre-painting inspection for an approved color? Is it more ridiculous than spending hours of your life micromanaging the lawn height and mailbox styles of everyone in Willow Creek?" A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd of onlookers. Karen's eyes darted around, realizing she was losing the audience. Her carefully constructed facade of suburban authority was crumbling. This is different," she insisted, her voice rising again. "This is personal." "Exactly," I said, finally putting down my iced tea. "This is personal, Karen. Just like you made it personal when you decided to target me with your petty rules and ridiculous fines. You wanted to control my house, my life, my beige-approved existence. Well, congratulations, Karen. You're now permanently etched onto my house, for everyone to see. Enjoy the view." Karen stood there, speechless, her face a mixture of rage and humiliation. She looked up at the mural again, her own exaggerated image staring back at her, a silent, colorful mockery of her suburban reign. Then, without another word, she turned and stomped back to her pristine white SUV, slammed the door, and sped away, leaving a trail of beige dust in her wake. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Neighbors I barely knew came up to me, shaking my hand, congratulating me, laughing at the absurdity of it all. Even some of the more conservative residents, the ones I'd always assumed were firmly in Karen's camp, offered hesitant smiles and words of support. It was as if the mural had broken some kind of spell, shattered the beige conformity of Willow Creek, and unleashed a wave of long-suppressed rebellion. Ricardo and his team, basking in the glow of their artistic triumph, packed up their equipment, grinning from ear to ear. "Legendary," Ricardo said, giving me a high five. "This is going to be legendary." The aftermath was interesting. The HOA predictably went into overdrive. Official letters arrived daily, each one escalating the threats and fines. Violation of community aesthetic standards, public nuisance, defacement of property. They even tried to claim the mural was a safety hazard, arguing that it might distract drivers. The fines mounted, reaching astronomical levels. But something unexpected happened. The community, or at least a significant portion of it, rallied to my defense. Neighbors started organizing protests, small, suburban protests, but protests nonetheless. They held signs with slogans like "Beige is boring" and "Free the Willow Creek 100", referring to the approximate square footage of Karen's face on my house. They started a GoFundMe campaign to help me pay the fines, which quickly surpassed its goal. Local news outlets picked up the story, drawn to the sheer absurdity of the HOA Karen mural saga. Suddenly, Willow Creek was no longer just another anonymous suburb. It was ground zero for a suburban culture war, a battle between beige conformity and colorful rebellion. The story went viral. HOA Karen became a meme, a symbol of petty suburban tyranny. My house, with its now famous mural, became a local landmark, attracting curious onlookers from miles around. People drove by just to take selfies with Karen's face in the background. Ricardo's mural became an unlikely tourist attraction, a testament to the power of art, satire, and suburban defiance. And Karen? She retreated. She stopped sending letters. She stopped attending HOA meetings. She became a recluse, hiding behind the beige walls of her slightly off-beige house. The HOA management company, sensing the tide turning, started to backpedal. The aggressive letters stopped. The fines were quietly reduced. The monotone voice on the phone suddenly became almost friendly. They even offered to mediate the dispute, suggesting a compromise that involved maybe keeping the mural, but perhaps toning down the colors. Toning down the colors of Karen's face. The irony was delicious. In the end, the mural stayed. The HOA, realizing they were fighting a losing battle, eventually dropped all fines and complaints. Karen remained in self-imposed exile, her reign of beige terror effectively over. Willow Creek, surprisingly, began to loosen up. The HOA bylaws were revised, becoming slightly less draconian. People started experimenting with bolder colors in their gardens, slightly more festive holiday lights. The beige grip on Willow Creek had been loosened, if not entirely broken. And it all started with a letter, a fine, and a very large, very colorful portrait of Karen Miller. Looking at my house now with Karen's face still staring out at the street, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about more than just paint. It was about standing up to petty tyranny, about reclaiming my space, about finding humor and color in a world that often tries to force us into beige conformity. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best way to fight beige is with a giant, brightly colored portrait of the Queen of Beige herself. It wasn't just legendary, as Ricardo had said. It was cathartic.